Finally, PoE 2 is right around the corner, releasing on December 6th, and GGG dropped a ton of info in their recent stream, and I desperately wanted to talk about it because I'm super keen to play this game. And since I used to play PoE back in the day when there wasn't even a Val Oversoul boss in Act 2, during its very early days, and I still remember that time, man, and I can't wait to get my hands on early day PoE 2. Well, what did we learn from the GGG stream? First of all, there are currently 6 classes in early access, out of a total of 12 classes. So the other 6 will be released in time, and well, definitely when the game fully releases. We have the Monk, which is, well, a typical martial arts class that uses quarter staves mainly. It's a quick and very mobile class, and it combines wind, lightning and frost attacks. Wind does all sorts of fancy stuff, lightning can shock for more damage, and frost, well, crowd controls enemies, so that's a good defensive option. Next we have the Warrior, which is a typical strong soldier class with slow but heavy and hard hitting attacks, slam attacks, some fire abilities. You also have shield skills and war cries as well, and also attack totems that are returning from PoE 1. There's also a new mechanic that grinding gear games added to the game, so now you can basically raise your shield to actively block incoming attacks. And you basically have a stamina bar, and that bar diminishes when you have incoming hits, and once the bar is gone, like in a Souls game, your stance is broken and you're stunned for a while, which makes you super vulnerable to attacks, so you have to be very careful about that. And now they also added WASD movement, and that's actually pretty cool when you play range classes. And the following classes are all more or less range classes, so yeah, let's start with the Ranger, obviously, which is a bow class. And the Ranger is basically built around running and shooting at the same time. There are some mobility skills that you can use, and you also have lightning shots and ice abilities and poison stuff, so you can basically blow up and nuke your entire screen with all sorts of fancy elemental and poison bow attacks. The Mercenary uses crossbows on the other hand, and there's a variety of a lot of different crossbows, like shotguns, sniper rifles, assault rifles, and grenade launchers. These are all crossbows that work modern weapons basically. And you also have different ammunition types, for example for fire or ice damage. You can also summon ballistas, that's more of a tactical thing. I also saw that you can create poison clouds on the ground, and then you can explode them. That whole combo stuff reminds me a little bit of Guild Wars 2's engineer class, where you could drop all sorts of fields and then explode these fields for cool bonus effects and trigger effects. Pretty cool, lots of combo potential there. Next one is the Witch, and the Witch is the good old summoner that returns from PoE 1. You have undead minions that you can summon. The Witch also specializes in curses to debuff her enemies. And of course you have dark magic spells in the form of bone spells, bone spear stuff, and chaos spells that deal damage over time, these dark magic chaos spells. And from what we've seen, there are permanent minions, and there are also probably temporary minions and command abilities to control them. Lots of fancy stuff there. And last but not least, we have the Sorceress, and she's the typical elementalist mage that we see in games like these, and you can combine different elements together. So as an example, we had the Flame Wall ability, which is a firewall that deals damage over time, but when you shoot projectiles through the firewall adds additional fire damage to that projectile. That's also a visual thing. You can see that the color of the spell projectiles changes a little bit, and yeah, you can basically deal extra damage with that as a sort of it's an active support gem, you could call it like that. She also utilizes trigger gems to proc specific abilities in specific situations and under specific conditions. The classes that are currently not implemented are the Templar, the Duelist, the Shadow, and the Marauder, the good old classes from PoE 1 basically, and as well as the Druid and the Huntress. I think Jonathan mentioned that they want to add the druid next, but I don't know, maybe they're gonna change plans. They always do. All classes also get access to so-called Ascension Classes. So you pick a starting class, and at some point in the game, I think they mentioned Act 2, you get the option to do some Ascension Trial Dungeon, which will reward you with a class-specific Ascension class at the end of that dungeon. And there are 2 different dungeons with different trials in them. You will face traps and all sorts of challenges, like accompanying a totem from one side to the other, and waves of monsters, and some boss fights in between in one trial dungeon, and the other one had a strong boss at the very end. But they're kind of similar to the labyrinth system in PoE 1. So labyrinth in PoE 1 was a bit annoying. I didn't really like that. So it returns here in the form of 2 trials, though they said they're gonna have 3 trials once the game ships fully. So they will add another one, and they're a little bit different from each other, and you don't have to do all 3 of them. You basically choose one of them and finish one of them, and that's enough. You don't have to do all 3 of them. So you basically have a variety of options, and you pick the one that suits you best. And these class specializations basically add cool, strong passive bonuses. Sometimes they also add active abilities that you then can enhance with your support gems. And yeah, they basically make your character stronger and give you the option to, well, build your character into a specific direction and embrace a certain theme, basically. And in early access, each class will have 2 ascendancies to pick from, and once they fully release, 3 will be the number of ascendancies that you can pick from, 3 per class. They also added a new resource to the game called Spirit. Spirit basically is a form of reservation for reservation abilities like auras or aura-like abilities, and buff spells like Arctic Armor, for example. And of course minions, so the Witch, for example, will focus on Spirit a lot to basically reserve Spirit for all of her minions. And if you want to focus more on Spirit, you will need Scepters, because Scepters give you more Spirit. I also think there are items that have Spirit bonuses, and I think there was stuff on the skill tree that can improve it a little bit. And there are also quests that reward you with a passive permanent bonus to Spirit. They also added a new change to the flask system. So in PoE 1 you had 5 flasks, and you could mix and match them, and people would use a ton of utility flasks and stuff like that. You could also enchant your flasks, especially with effects like remove bleeding, remove burning, remove curses, and also remove freezing, remove being frozen, because let's say you open a strong box, it freezes you, the box summons 20 enemies, they all shoot at you once, you're basically dead. So you want to remove these effects. That's no longer the case. Now you have 1 dedicated life and mana flask, that's it. But you can basically unlock up to 3 slots for equipable charms. The better your belt, the better you upgrade your belt, the more slots for charms you will have, and from what I've seen it was up to 3. These charms basically take over these protective elements that you would previously have on your flasks in PoE 1. So what we saw was a charm with 85 charges. If you use it, it uses up all these 85 charges at once, and you don't use it actively. It gets triggered when you are frozen. You immediately unfreeze, and you become immune to the freeze effect for 3 seconds. Of course, you can enchant these items with currency items / orbs to add, for example, 20% more duration, so the effect lasts a little bit longer. And of course, similar to flasks, you also recover these charges by killing monsters. Now, let's talk about skills. Gems come in the form of uncut gems, and when you click them, a window opens, and from that window you can basically select new active skill gems or level up your existing skill gems. There's also support skill gems that you can pick from uncut support gems, and there is this line on the bottom that says recommended. And as long as that one is checked, you're only shown the abilities that basically fit your class and your playstyle. But if you uncheck that, you can basically select and choose and pick everything. So beginners might probably stick to the recommended part, so they are not overwhelmed with all these options. That's perfectly fine, and it's very beginner friendly, and it's a good move by GGG, by the way. And all experienced players will have a ton of fun experimenting with all these possibilities. Can't wait to try that out. By the way, you no longer socket your gems into your gear. So you now have a dedicated window for your active ability gems and abilities, and each ability gets up to 5 additional sockets, and you can socket your support gems into these sockets. And there's a ton of different support gems in the game, but you can only use one of each type. So let's say you find faster cast rate, you can only link it to one ability. You cannot have 3 faster cast rates or 3 faster attack speed support gems active at the same time. So that means you need to choose wisely in order to get the most out of your build. Next, in good old PoE fashion, we have a passive skill tree, and in PoE 2 the skill tree is even bigger than in PoE 1. So the devs said it will be like 1500 nodes on the skill tree, and that I cannot completely understand that, and that looks intimidating at first glance. But however, the devs also confirmed that in comparison to PoE 1, PoE 2 will have skill nodes that are way more useful for your character, while PoE 1 had nodes that were less useful for your build. They were very specific, and if you picked the wrong nodes, you could completely brick your character. And now they say that's no longer that much the case. It will be way harder to screw up your character, and well, that, in my opinion, makes it less intimidating. Furthermore, I think, at least based on my personal experience, that the amount of skill points that we will have will probably be the same, maybe a little bit more, but remember this, you probably never reach level 100 in that game. When you reach level 90, like, leveling gets really slow in PoE 1. I don't know if it's the same in PoE 2, but I assume it is. So forget about the last 10 skill points or so that you're gonna have. So maybe you're gonna have 100, 110, 120 skill points or so. Well, 1500 nodes versus like a bit over 100 skill points, well, that's a big difference. So even though the skill tree looks intimidating and very huge at first glance, you only spec into a very small fraction of it, and that's the parts you need to focus on, and you will completely ignore the rest of the skill tree. Yes, it's a ton of nodes, but you ignore most of it, so it's actually way smaller than you think it is, and that makes it, at least in my opinion, way less intimidating. And in addition to that, they also introduced gold to respec. So in PoE 1 you had these orbs of regret, and you also got a few respec points from certain quests, but they were not even near enough to fully respec your character, so you would rather roll a new one. And yeah, respecking was a chore in PoE 1. Now you can easily respec with gold. Also the attribute nodes on the passive skill tree that connect the other clusters and stuff, they are cheaper to respec, so that makes it also easy. So if you do something wrong, if you're not happy with your build and the way it turns out, you can just easily respec that. There's also a new type of skill points that you can earn from certain side quests and stuff like that, and these skill points are basically temporary and they're tied to your weapon sets. So you can swap weapons in PoE, so let's call them weapon set 1 and weapon set 2, and you can tie specific skill points to weapon set 1 and a different amount of skill points to weapon set 2 basically. And in the footage we could perfectly see how that works. So the guy puts a few skill points into fire nodes and then a few skill points into lightning nodes. And when he swaps to his lightning staff, then the nodes get swapped from fire to lightning, and he deals more lightning damage, and he will use his lightning abilities, and then he swaps back to fire, and these nodes swap back as well. So this is a very dynamic playstyle, and you could do all sorts of cool things with that. Imagine you have like a second weapon setup with a shield that is fully focused on defense, and a boss, for example, is about to enrage and going into enrage mode, so you expect a lot of incoming damage. Bam, you swap to your defensive setup, you soak up all the damage, the boss's rage is over, you swap back to your DPS setup, and boom, you can go and deal damage again. Like, That's a really cool system. I don't know if it will be really necessary to do it. I assume it's a little bit intimidating if you are a beginner in this game, so I think it's not necessary to do that at the beginning. You can focus on that later on, and yeah, maybe it won't be even necessary. We will see about that. But it's also a really fancy feature. Let's talk about items. So items in PoE 2 will be quite a bit similar to PoE 1. You have normal items, these are white, magic items blue, rare is yellow, and unique is orange. Basically the same, but it will be way more important to apply currency items in the form of like orbs and stuff to the like weapons and armor items you find in order to upgrade them, because they will carry you through the campaign. So in the footage we could see like a white item and then a transmutation orb is added to change the white item into a blue item, and that process adds 1 affix. Then an orb of alteration is used, and that adds a second affix to the item, and the item is still blue. And then they add a regal orb. This turns the item from a blue item into a yellow item, so it's a rare item now, and that adds 1 additional affix. The maximum for affixes is 6, and so you have 3 remaining spots for affixes that remain, and you can fill those by using exalted orbs. So you activate exalts and add more affixes to the item up to the point where you reach the maximum of 6. Basically, with the new system you have more orbs and you can use them more often and upgrade your items, and then you can progress to the campaign faster and smoother, and that's really cool. Can't wait to test that. They still have sockets, by the way, but as mentioned before, you no longer socket your gems into your gear. So what do you do with sockets? Well, they added a new item type, runes. And in the footage we saw a cold rune being socketed into a defensive item, into an armor piece, and the rune added cold resistance. So you can basically fix your resistances with runes in the game, and that is really amazing. It's a new type of item. You can modify your items even more, and that's really great. Runes can also add additional damage to your weapons, so it's also good to have sockets on your weapons, and yeah, that's really amazing. They also added a currency exchange market, so you can change currencies with other players, I think. And yeah, you change transmutations to alterations and vice versa, and all the other currency items. So that's really cool, because trading with players is a mega slog when it comes to trading currency. And they also added gold. Gold is being used for respecking and for buying items at specific vendors, like these ordinary vendors in town. They sell items and you buy them with gold. And if I'm not mistaken, they mentioned that these vendors get their stock reset each time you level up, so you should check back every once in a while to see if they have new stuff to offer. And yeah, gold is the only item that is not tradable in the game. Everything else will be tradable. Let's talk a little bit about the acts that are available and the leveling process. It's an early access game, and since ARPGs are, well, at some point mostly played for the end game and not for the actual story and the campaign, testing that specific feature during early access is actually very crucial and important. And to focus exactly on that, the devs will give us only acts 1 to 3 instead of like 1 to 6. We only get half of it, 1 to 3. But in exchange, we can test most of the endgame content, which is more important. So that means acts 4, 5, 6 will not be available in early access, and they will be added later or once the game fully releases. So in order to gap these missing 3 acts, we will be giving a temporary solution in the form of a second difficulty that allows us to play through the game a second time, like in good old Diablo 2 fashion, or PoE also, like PoE 1 also had several difficulties back in the day. So we basically replay the campaign and probably unlock skill books and stuff like these once more, and so they basically simulate 6 acts by doing that. And after that we will tackle the endgame content. And the devs also mentioned that playing through acts 1, 2, 3 will take about 25 hours. I don't exactly know what that means. So does that mean playing to 3 acts will take 25 hours? Then the second difficulty begins, another 25 hours. Will we take 50 hours to play through this game? Holy crap. Or did they mean playing through acts 1, 2, 3 in both difficulties will take 25 hours? I don't know, but 50 hours would be crazy. We will see about that, guys. Can't wait to test it. Okay, I just mentioned endgame, so let's talk endgame. According to the devs, we will have up to 7 things to do in the endgame. So in good old PoE fashion, we have an atlas with maps, so we can run maps like we used to in PoE 1, more or less, and we will encounter specific map mechanics there that are like inspired by specific PoE seasons, and on these like atlas map areas you will have these like towers, and you can then use like specific items that you find in these season specific maps to basically enchant these towers, and then all maps in the radius will basically inherit these season specific mechanics. So when it comes to these mechanics, we have Breach, Ritual, Delirium and Expedition. So yeah, in Breach you can basically find like these specific Breach items, then you use them to enchant these towers or like spires or whatever they are called. And that basically turns maps around that area into breach maps. And yeah, if you want, you can make the entire world one big breach. Ho ho! So in Breach, Breach is basically the same as in PoE 1. You open a rift and then, yeah, you have like a parallel universe that basically floods into your universe, and there's tons of monsters spawning and you have to kill them ASAP. And Breach will be pretty cool for farming specific rings that can be upgraded with quality increasing items a bit more. And there's also, yeah, items that increase the quality of rings. So if you want to farm for crazy rings, you could focus on Breach. Then there's Ritual, where you defeat like waves of monsters, and yeah, you get a currency from that, and you can buy items and specific crafting items that, for example, can control the outcome of an exalted orb. Like your next exalted orb will only produce prefixes or suffixes or something like that. I think we saw prefixes in the demo. Delirium is also back. It's this like grayish crystal mirror thingy. You click it, the whole world turns grey, and then there's tons of monsters spawning. And yeah, in Delirium maps you can find cool upgrade items that you combine with your amulet to craft a specific amulet. And that bonus that you craft on the amulet is basically a bonus from a skill node from your skill tree. So let's say you are in the far upper right corner of your skill tree. That's where your class starts, and that's where you put your skill points into. And you could get a skill node from the like very bottom or something like that. So with a perfectly crafted amulet, you could make a crazy character with crazy bonuses. And it also serves as one additional passive point, basically. So that's really cool. So if you wanna get the perfect amulet in the end game, that's where you get it. And of course, we have the Expedition League. Who doesn't like, yeah, exploding dig sites and or finding crazy artifacts that you then turn into specific items at these settlers or whatever they are. Yeah, I think you can get cool and crazy weapons and armors there. So yeah, all these things are basically there to focus farm on specific items and stuff like that. So the other two remaining endgame activities are, first of all, endgame versions of the Ascendancy trials. So they are like more difficult, bigger, harder, longer, stronger, faster, whatever. So, and you get cool and crazy rewards at the end. In some of them you can find jewels that you can socket into your skill tree. So good old jewels from PoE 1 are making a return, and yeah, you can use them to make your character even more efficient. There are some of them that give you more damage or like chances for elemental effects, and others can improve nodes around them and stuff, so that's really cool. And in other trials you can find Val Orbs making a return as well. And for those who don't know how they work, so you basically apply a Val Orb to an item and then it's corrupted. It means you can no longer change the item whatsoever. It will be locked in, whatever condition it is. So craft it first, then use a Val Orb. What does a Val Orb do? Well, it can completely change what your item does and completely brick and ruin it. It can, I think, also do nothing, and it can also add a specific unique effect that you would normally never find on that item, basically turning it into an absolute best in slot giga god tier item. And you can also add additional sockets. Normally small items, like small armor items, have one socket. chess pieces and two-handers have 2 sockets, and with that you can add an additional socket to like a two-hander or a chess piece or so. So that's also really strong, and yeah, that's something you will aim for at the very end game when it comes to really like min-maxing your character. So that's really cool when it comes to long-term motivation. Speaking of long-term motivation, we also have pinnacle bosses, and these are the ultimate challenge in the game. So they talked about like some uber bosses that you need to kill, and once you kill them you get like some item from each of them, and you need those to then get access to this like fortress thingy that is surrounded by a maze labyrinth thing, and inside there's like some ultra giga boss that they didn't want it to spoiler, but it sounds crazy. Can't wait to see that. Also, like in the first game, PoE 2 also has an Atlas skill tree that offers a variety of bonuses that you can unlock with Atlas skill tree points. For example, like a 10% higher chance that rare monsters can spawn or something like that. Or there are specific areas in these skill trees like that focuses on specific things. For example, you can focus on killing bosses, and not every map on the Atlas will have an end boss. So you will maybe focus only on these specific maps that have bosses, focus your Atlas skill tree around boss kills, and focus your build around killing bosses. So you can basically make a boss farmer and profit from that. So that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about this like Atlas and map system in detail. So in PoE 1 you basically had to find a specific map that you wanted to run, like a beach map or something like that. You slot it in the machine, the portals open, and bam, you're at the beach. And in PoE 2 it looks like you have now waystones instead of maps. You go to the Atlas tree, you pick whatever map you want to play, and the game uses up one waystone, like a key, like a one-time use key, to basically get access to that maps. And in a similar fashion to PoE 1, a bunch of portals open, you go through the portal and you're inside the map. If you die, the portal closes, and once all portals are gone, you fail the map. That is bad, because when you finish a map, when you successfully finish a map, you unlock other maps around. If you fail it, the map becomes red on the Atlas and you cannot progress in that area any longer. You need to successfully run and finish maps around it and find a way around that map that is basically blocked now. It doesn't mean you're completely locked out, it just means you have to go a longer way around it, but it still works. But that's also not a bad system in my opinion. So you will try to focus on not failing and not dying in maps. So that means you have to maybe play a little bit smarter, don't be tired, and maybe build your character a little bit more defensive. So that's really cool. Can't wait to try that too. Oh yeah, also before I forget it, in addition to all of that, you can of course, in good old PoE 1 fashion, use orbs to enchant your maps or waystones for additional maluses and bonuses. So it's riskier, but you get more rewards. Same principle. Oh, and you can also find hideouts on the Atlas that you can unlock and of course decorate with all sorts of items, same as in PoE 1. Another feature that's going to return and that I mentioned before are strong boxes. So it's basically just a chest. You use your currency items to enchant that chest, and it gets different bonuses, like, I don't know, like the chest has a higher chance to spawn currency items or all sorts of other crazy stuff, and you click the chest and then a lot of monsters spawn, you kill the monsters, the chest opens and you get the loot. And what also returns are these crystallized monsters. They basically look like enemies that are frozen in crystals, and when you click them they freeze up, you kill them and they drop these essences. Those are basically specific currency orb items, and you can use them to add affixes to your items, and some of them give you specific items. So if you're looking for a specific stat that you're missing, like a certain resistance type, then yeah, you can fix that with such an item. So that's also good to see, good to hear. So we can, basically many options to fix your resists or like missing stats that you need. And yeah, it's great that we have such a big variety of things that we can do to build our characters. So that was a ton of crazy stuff they announced there, and I can't wait to test all of these crazy things, and I'm super keen to try out new builds and stuff like that. And yeah, let's see if we can find some cool build, let's see if we can break the game or find some fancy crazy exploit. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening so long, and have a nice day. Bye bye.